The hall was already filled when Jasmine Crockett stepped inside, but the room seemed to shift the moment she appeared. The forum had been advertised for weeks, drawing students, professors, small business owners, tech workers, lawyers, and community leaders from across the city. The topic digital privacy versus public safety was something people argued about online every day, but rarely with calm voices or open minds. Tonight, however, was meant to be different. It was a gathering of people who wanted clarity instead of noise, direction instead of confusion. Yet even with that peaceful purpose, there was a noticeable charge in the air. That charge had everything to do with the two people sitting on opposite sides of the long panel table, Jasmine Crockett and Justice Clarence. Thomas, both were respected. Both were experienced, and both were known for speaking with precision. But they came from very different worlds, and everyone in the room sensed that those worlds might collide, or at least brush against each other once the discussion began. Jasmine took her seat with quiet confidence. She didn't fuss with her papers or rehearse her opening remarks under her breath. She simply smoothed the sleeves of her blazer and looked around the room, acknowledging the audience with a small, calm smile. That small gesture alone eased some of the tension. People who had only seen her on screens now saw her as a real person, grounded, composed, and ready. Across from her, Justice Thomas sat with his usual stillness. He did not smile, but neither did he appear cold. His expression was steady, observant, almost unreadable. Decades of legal experience had trained him to listen before acting, and that habit shaped his presence now. He gently adjusted his glasses and glanced at the crowd, his eyes reflecting the seriousness of the forum. For him, this wasn't entertainment or spectacle. It was a conversation about responsibility, order, and the foundation of society. The moderator walked to the podium, greeted the room, and introduced the theme of the night. "We're here," she said, "to talk about a question every person faces. Even if they don't realize it, how do we balance personal freedom with public safety in a world where technology sees more than we think?" The words settled over the crowd. Some nodded thoughtfully. Others folded their arms, skeptical but curious. Before the moderator could invite Jasmine to speak, Justice Thomas lifted his hand slightly, signaling he wanted to begin. The moderator looked surprised, but she allowed it. The room leaned in. It wasn't disrespect, it was strategy. Thomas wanted to set the ground first, to frame the issue from the perspective of law and structure. His voice was calm but firm. "We must ask ourselves," he began, "who draws the lines that hold society together? Freedom is a cornerstone, yes. But without any boundaries, without any safeguards, can freedom survive? Can a society function?" His words were not meant to provoke, but the way he said them direct, unwavering, made them feel like a silent challenge to whoever would speak next. The room grew quieter. Even the faint hum of the air conditioning faded into the background as people sensed something important was unfolding. Justice Thomas continued, explaining that every right comes with responsibility, and every system must protect its citizens from harm. He emphasized that order is not the enemy of liberty, but often its guardian. His tone remained steady, but the message was clear. Digital freedoms must be weighed carefully, not recklessly. When he finished, he looked across the table, not at the moderator, not at the crowd, but directly at Jasmine Crockett. His gaze was not hostile, but it carried the weight of expectation. The kind of expectation that comes when someone who has spent decades shaping legal thought asks for a response from someone who represents a newer, more contemporary voice. All eyes shifted to Jasmine. She didn't rush. Instead, she breathed in slowly, letting the weight of the moment settle. She knew that if she responded too quickly, it would seem reactive. If she spoke too slowly, it might seem uncertain. So she chose a middle path, steady, clear, intentional. She looked at the audience first, not at Justice Thomas. And that simple choice changed the energy of the room. It told people this wasn't a battle between two individuals. It was a conversation meant for everyone. Only then did she shift her gaze back to Thomas, meeting his eyes with calm confidence. Her voice was warm but firm, carrying just enough strength to hold the audience's attention without sounding combative. "That's the question," she said. "Where is the line? And more importantly, who decides that line in a nation as diverse as ours?" She didn't challenge him directly. She didn't reject his point. Instead, she reframed the issue, creating a sense that this wasn't a debate with winners and losers, but a search for understanding. The moment she finished, murmurs moved through the crowd. Not dramatic whispers, just small, thoughtful reactions from people who recognized that Jasmine had shifted the direction of the discussion. She hadn't pushed back. She had opened the conversation wider, just as Thomas watched her with a measured expression. Maybe he expected her to take a firmer stance. Maybe he expected hesitation. But she had offered neither. She had answered his question without letting his framing control the entire discussion. The moderator stepped forward again, sensing the tension rising, but also seeing the opportunity for a deeper conversation. She thanked both speakers for their opening thoughts and invited the dialogue to continue. But the weight of that first exchange lingered in the air. It was clear to everyone that this discussion would not be simple, and it was even clearer that neither of them, neither Thomas nor Jasmine, planned to back down. The moment the moderator turned the discussion toward real-life implications, the entire room straightened in their chairs. People weren't just here to hear theories, they wanted practical answers. The moderator asked both speakers to explain how digital privacy issues affect everyday Americans. And with that, the conversation moved from philosophy to the lives of real people. Jasmine leaned forward slightly, her hands resting calmly on the table. She didn't wait for a grand introduction. She spoke directly, as if speaking to someone across a kitchen table instead of a crowded auditorium. "This isn't about tech companies or government agencies alone," she said. "It's about regular people. People who work two jobs. Parents trying to protect their kids online. Seniors who just want to safely check their bank balance. Privacy isn't an idea, something that affects every single moment of our lives." Her words flowed quickly, yet clearly. She told the story of Malik, a college student who worked part-time at a grocery store and used a simple budgeting app to track his spending. He didn't know the app collected more data than he expected. Later, he began receiving messages predicting purchases he hadn't made, and he realized the app knew more about him than some of his closest friends. It wasn't dangerous, but it was unsettling. He wondered, Jasmine said, if convenience is worth giving up pieces of our private selves without even knowing it. People nodded, recognizing the feeling. Most had experienced moments just like that, moments that made them pause and ask how much of their life was visible to strangers. Then Jasmine shifted to another example, Maria, a mother of two who installed home security cameras to keep her family safe. She later learned the footage was being stored off-site, accessible to technicians she had never met. It wasn't illegal. It wasn't malicious. But it didn't feel right to her. She thought she was buying peace of mind, Jasmine explained. Instead, she realized she'd invited unknown eyes into the most private place in her life, her home. As Jasmine finished, the room grew noticeably quieter. Her examples were simple but powerful. They weren't about politics or law. They were about people trying to live ordinary lives while navigating technology that moved faster than their comfort. Justice Thomas waited patiently. When he finally spoke, his tone was steady, almost reflective. "Technology changes," he said, "but the need for order does not. We cannot allow fear of innovation to eclipse the broader responsibility we share to maintain safety and stability." He wasn't dismissing Jasmine's examples. He acknowledged them, but he saw a bigger picture. He talked about Ethan, a high school student who had been bullied online. The school couldn't take action because the messages came from an encrypted platform, leaving administrators powerless. Privacy, Thomas said, should not shield harm. He explained that some protections, while well-intentioned, made it harder to address real threats. Then he described a small local business that faced repeated digital break-ins. Hackers used private networks to hide their identities. The business nearly closed. "We must ask," he said, "how far anonymity should go when it endangers livelihoods." The audience listened closely. Thomas didn't speak with urgency. He spoke with weight. His examples reminded people that privacy can protect innocent people, but it can also shelter wrongdoing. His message wasn't that privacy should disappear, only that privacy without boundaries could harm the very people it was meant to shield. A young man in the audience. Jake raised his hand during the Q&A moment offered by the moderator. He worked in IT and admitted he saw both sides every day. He explained how companies fought to keep user data safe, but also how some customers demanded total anonymity even when systems needed minimal information to function. "Sometimes the tech itself gets blamed," he said, "when really it's the misuse that causes trouble." His comment sparked murmurs. People understood that the world was more complicated than simply choosing freedom or choosing safety. Jasmine picked up on this point. "Most people," she said, "aren't asking for perfect privacy. They just want control. They want to know what they're signing up for." Her voice softened just slightly. "If people understand how their information is used, they can make informed choices. But when they're kept in the dark, trust breaks down." Justice Thomas didn't disagree. He even nodded slightly. But he added, "Transparency is valuable. Still, there are moments when immediate decisions are needed, moments where safety takes priority." His voice wasn't forceful, just firm. "We must consider the cost of hesitation." Two viewpoints now stood clearly before the audience. Jasmine's belief that people deserve autonomy over their digital lives, and Thomas's belief that structure and swift action protect society from hidden dangers. Neither position was extreme. Neither was unreasonable. But they created a natural tension to truths trying to share the same space. A woman near the front. Jenna, who worked as a nurse, raised her hand to share her own perspective. She explained how hospital systems store medical records online. Privacy mattered hugely, but access mattered too. "If a doctor can't see a patient's history in the middle of an emergency," she said, "lives are at risk." Her voice trembled slightly as she added, "Sometimes speed matters more than secrecy." Her comment stretched the debate even further. It wasn't just about tech. It was about life, safety, dignity, choice. Jasmine acknowledged Jenna's point. "You're right," she said. "There are moments when access must be immediate. But that same access must not be used to watch people who aren't in danger or hurting anyone." She wasn't correcting. She was layering. Her tone stayed calm, respectful, steady. Justice Thomas responded with equal respect. "We agree on more than it seems," he said. "But agreements often hide the hardest part, the details." The room felt the weight of that truth. This wasn't a fight. It was a crossroads, and everyone sensed the next exchange might push the conversation into deeper, sharper territory. The courtroom felt unusually still when the debate reached its turning point. For most of the hearing, people had whispered, adjusted their seats, and scribbled notes. But now, as Jasmine finished laying out her vision for balanced online privacy laws, the room became quiet enough to hear the soft hum of the overhead lights. Even Clarence Thomas, who had spent much of the morning asking short, sharp questions, leaned forward slightly, as if preparing for the next round. Eddie and Mariah, sitting behind Jasmine, exchanged a quick glance. They could feel something shifting, but neither knew what would come next. Justice Thomas cleared his throat. His voice was calm, but firm. "Ms. Crockett," he said, "you speak about balance. You speak about fairness. But you still have not answered the real concern. How do we protect people from losing control of their own information?" His tone wasn't angry, but it carried weight. The kind that made everyone straighten in their seats. Jasmine kept her stance steady. But inside, she knew this was the moment that would decide whether her argument held. She had expected a challenge, but the way he framed the question made it sound as if her ideas were too idealistic, too trusting in people and technology. Instead of answering immediately, she took a small breath and gave herself a second to think. The room watched, waiting. Justice Thomas continued. "If companies collect too much data, there is risk. If the government collects too much data, there is risk. You keep speaking about trust. But trust is fragile. When it breaks, people suffer. So tell us, how does your plan prevent that?" His words hit Eddie especially hard. He had lived that fear. He had lost his job, his home, and nearly his confidence because one platform misread his past. If Jasmine didn't answer clearly now, he felt the entire hearing could turn against her. Mariah studied Jasmine closely. She respected the judge's question. To her, it was valid. She believed that strong rules mattered, not for control, but to protect people like Eddie. She hoped Jasmine would understand that she didn't want chaos online. She wanted fairness too, just through firmer boundaries. Jasmine finally spoke. "Justice Thomas, you're right about one thing," she began. "Trust is fragile. But fear is powerful too. If we build everything around fear, we end up creating systems that watch people more than they help them." Her tone was calm, but her pace quickened, as if she felt the energy in the room rise. People want safety, yes, but they also want freedom. Both matter. Thomas didn't respond immediately. He glanced down at his notes, then back up at her. The air felt tight, like everyone was holding their breath. Jasmine continued. "I'm not saying companies should have free access to our lives. I'm saying that people should have the power to choose what happens to their information. Not corporations. Not the government. Individuals." She stepped slightly forward. "Think about Eddie. He didn't lose his job because he did something wrong. He lost it because someone else had control over his information. Now imagine if he had been given clear rights, simple rights to see what was collected, correct mistakes, and challenge decisions. That's not soft policy. That's practical protection." Eddie felt a wave of relief wash over him. She had said exactly what he needed the room to understand. But Justice Thomas wasn't convinced. "And yet," he said slowly, "rights only matter if the system enforcing them works. If companies resist, if people do not understand the policies, if agencies fail, your plan depends on many things going right." The challenge was sharp, but not unfair. Jasmine nodded. "Yes, it does. But so does every system we rely on: schools, hospitals, courts, even this one. We don't give up on improvement because it's difficult. We build guardrails. We create transparency. We educate people so they know their rights. And we design laws that do not overwhelm them with technical language." Someone in the gallery whispered quietly, "She's good." But most people were too focused on the exchange to react. Mariah found herself unexpectedly moved. She had never disagreed with Jasmine out of dislike. She simply feared that too much freedom online could hurt people before laws adapted. But now, hearing Jasmine speak so plainly about balance, she understood the argument in a new way. It wasn't about choosing sides. It was about choosing a path that respected both protection and independence. Thomas rested his chin on his hand. Studying Jasmine with careful eyes, So you believe education is the foundation? He asked. Education and choice, Jasmine said. If people know what's happening with their data, and if they have easy tools to control it, we get a safer system, not because someone is watching over them, but because they can watch over themselves. The idea was simple, maybe too simple for a courtroom known for deep analysis. Yet its simplicity made the message clear enough for everyone listening, from lawyers to students, from judges to ordinary citizens following the case outside. Justice Thomas leaned back, silent again. It was impossible to read his expression. Was he impressed? Uncertain. Challenged? No one could tell. And then he asked the question that shifted the entire tone of the room. Miss Crockett, what happens if your approach fails? It was the kind of question that could make arguments collapse. It hinted at risk, responsibility, and consequences all at once. Eddie leaned forward. Mariah froze. Even the court reporter paused for a second. Jasmine didn't hesitate this time. If my approach fails, she said, at least people lose power because of their own choices, not because someone else took it from them. The room murmured. It wasn't applause, but it was a subtle shift to recognition that her answer carried meaning. Thomas raised an eyebrow, surprised by the clarity of the reply for the first time all morning. He didn't have a follow-up question, and that silence changed everything. The room stayed quiet. Long after Justice Thomas fell silent. It wasn't the heavy silence of confusion or tension, it was the silence that comes when people are thinking deeply. Even those who entered the hearing with strong opinions now seemed unsure of where they stood. Jasmine felt that shift, but she didn't celebrate it. She knew the hardest part was still ahead, convincing people that balanced privacy rights were not just possible, but necessary. The presiding judge signaled that each side had a chance for closing remarks. The attorneys shuffled their papers, preparing crisp statements. But before anyone spoke, Justice Thomas leaned slightly forward, just enough to show he had something left to say. Ms. Crockett, he began slowly. Your argument makes assumptions about people's ability to manage their own information. Not everyone has the understanding, the time, or the tools. What would you say to those who fear that your system puts the burden on the public instead of on those in power? His tone was not harsh anymore. It sounded almost curious, as if he genuinely wanted to see whether she had more to offer. Jasmine stepped toward the podium again. She didn't rush. She took the moment seriously. Her voice was quieter now, but it carried clearly through the room. I don't want to burden people, she said. I want to empower them. And empowerment doesn't mean giving everyone the same task, it means giving everyone the same opportunity. She looked around at the faces in the gallery. The students, the workers, the retirees who had come out of interest or concern. Some people will want more control. Some will trust systems to manage information for them. That's okay. Choice is the key. Eddie nodded softly. That was exactly how he felt. He didn't want to control every piece of data. He just wanted the option to correct the things that were wrong. Mariah listened with her arms folded. But she wasn't defensive anymore. She found herself thinking about her younger brother, who often clicked agree on anything online without reading a word. Maybe what Jasmine was proposing could protect people like him, to not by locking the internet down, but by giving people simple paths to fix problems when they appeared. Jasmine continued. We can build systems that work for different types of people. Those who want control and those who don't want to think about it every day. But what we cannot do is build systems where people have no voice at all. The judge nodded. A few people murmured in agreement. But Thomas still wasn't finished. He spoke again, slowly, as if weighing each word. So you are saying the real danger isn't oversight. It isn't technology. It is silence, people having no say in what happens to their personal information. Yes, Jasmine replied. And that silence can harm people just as much as misuse. There was something about the way she said it clear, steady, that made the room feel lighter. The tension between both sides softened, not because anyone fully agreed, but because they understood each other better. The judge asked both parties to present their closing remarks. The attorney representing the strict regulation side went first. Her voice was confident. "Your Honors, we want privacy laws that protect people before harm is done. We don't want systems that wait for mistakes to happen. Strong rules save lives, jobs, and opportunities. A safer online world requires responsibility not only from users, but especially from the institutions that hold their information." Her statement was clear, logical, and sincere. Many in the room nodded. Even Jasmine did. She respected the argument. When it was Jasmine's turn, she stepped up without her notes. She didn't need them anymore. "Your Honors," she said, "I agree with many of the concerns raised today. People need protection. But protection should not mean removing their power. It should mean supporting their freedom. Technology has changed our world. It will keep changing it. We need laws that can grow with people, not over them." She paused, letting her words settle. "We are not choosing between safety and freedom. We are choosing how to balance both. My plan is not perfect. No plan is. But it gives something strong to every person a voice. And when people have a voice in how their data is used, they stand taller. They feel safer. They feel respected." For a moment, no one moved. Justice Thomas, who rarely showed much emotion during hearings, tilted his head slightly. It was small, almost invisible, but enough for Eddie to notice. Then came the moment no one expected. Thomas said, "Ms. Crockett, earlier I asked what happens if your approach fails. Now I ask a different question. What happens if it succeeds?" The question lingered in the air, gentle, open, almost hopeful. Jasmine answered without hesitation. "If it succeeds, people don't just get privacy. They get dignity." The judge called the hearing to a close, thanking everyone for their arguments. People stood, gathering their things, still whispering about the final exchange. No one knew how the ruling would turn out. But everyone sensed that something meaningful had happened, something that would shape the conversation far beyond the courtroom. Eddie and Mariah walked out together. They still disagreed on parts of the issue, but now their disagreement felt productive, not hostile. They had listened, learned, and understood the weight behind each other's fears and hopes, and somewhere behind them. Justice Thomas watched the courtroom empty, quietly replaying Jasmine's final line in his mind. People don't just get privacy. They get dignity. It stayed with him long after the doors closed.